A lot of stuff I want to get to, but I will tell you, for folks who may have seen a piece that the Times did in late May about yourself and other members as well, other sisters who just do so much work for such a population that, more than underserved, is a lot of times by society forgotten. And we're talking about kids, yes, as well as the moms that sometimes come out with prison. You explained, with only the clothes on their back and nothing else. Put a face on this population for us, if you would.
They come out with a dream in their heart also, because they know that they've made poor choices, landed them in prison, and their children have really been the victims of that choice. And they need help to get their lives together. And they can't do it alone, Rich. They need a home. That's what we offer the women, a home and a very structured program that enables them to get the building blocks to a life that they never had. And again, many people call this a second chance. For me, I see it more and more. After 26 years, it's a first chance, that many of our women never had the opportunities that we grew up with. We didn't come from a family of faith. They didn't have a work ethic. They certainly didn't get a good education. And just the family atmosphere of their lives was really not there to support them. So they're looking for that from us, from the staff of our children, and then they become family to each other to continue that support. And that's what the work that we do. And the FACE is, you know, currently 2,700 women in New York State prison. 75% are mothers, and children, most often, 10% about in foster care, but the others are with family care or friends, and really many of them tossed from pillar to post until they have the security of a mother coming out of prison to rebuild their lives.
Give an idea, other members of the religious order, some of the works they do. I mean, because, you know, sometimes it always gets me a little tweaked when politics gets involved and people talk about churches. Part of what our faith's about is feed the hungry and clothe the naked.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about gay marriage or contraception and all that. It's about, and the part that I'm personally most proud of my faith is to look out for those that don't have as much, which was part of what the calling was, not just for people who, you know, wear a robe, but also for people, the laity. That's what, you know, that's what you're there for. So I was reading about other members of the religious order and some of the stuff they do in some of the toughest neighborhoods. They're not looking and don't get a check for it. And they're not doing it even for thanks. They are, I think, some of the heroes that go unrecognized, but without them, I shudder to think what some of these populations would do. Try and put a face on some of these fellow members of the religious order that you know so well.
Sure. Again, the call of the gospel is very simple. Love God, love your neighbor. And where your neighbor is, then that's where we need to be. And the needs of the dear neighbor, as my community calls the people we serve. Many of the sisters have been traditionally in education. I was an educator, I was a principal, and then I saw the needs of the women coming out of prison were underserved. So I wanted to put my energies and talents and gifts toward that ministry, and my community gave me the freedom to do that. Other sisters equally are engaged in soup kitchens, in outreach programs in parishes to help immigrants to learn English, to get GEDs, to really build a life here in America that very often they're on the fringe, they're marginalized. And again, if they come with if they have no education, either living here or come with no education, that's the grassroots piece. We have a learning connection where we bring immigrant women in to learn and to get educated with a basic GED and a lot of life skills, things we can forget about. So our sisters and the sisters all over this nation are engaged where the people are, and the needs of the people are.
And some of the roughest neighborhoods sometimes. You're dealing with ex-cons, you're dealing with the hungry, you're dealing with people that society in large part has thrown to the side here. Sure. And it's in that context that when we hear about the latest fight, if you will, that with the Vatican and what they had to say about sisters and religious orders, and in fact some of the language, serious doctrinal problems, radical feminist themes. What was your reaction when you heard the words, and also how it was handled? Because for me, and I will tell you from the laity perspective, regardless of people conservative, progressive, it doesn't make a difference. You don't pick on nuns, for crying out loud. If there's anybody who earned the distinction to not only be left alone, to be appreciated, you're talking about sisters, for crying out loud. I haven't met one person who said, you know what, go get them, Vatican. It makes no sense.
No, I agree with you. And I think the two operative words here now are stunned and saddened. And I think that captures where we are right now. The LCW are a wonderful group of leadership for 80% of the religious women across the United States. And they stand at the forefront of the issues that we have to face. And they speak with a voice that's educated, that's certainly prayerful and profound. And we don't get it. I mean, to be quite honest, I don't get it. And I await and support what the public statement from LCWR is to the Vatican. And they have their August assembly, and that meeting is continuing. And then there will be a public statement about what the our stance is toward the Vatican. And I think, again, we stand in support of that, and we wait for that to happen because...
But I have a broader question.
Yeah.
What are we doing in that, if you love this church, we were more in the 60s after Second Vatican, that we were farther along than we are now in the 21st century.
Yes.
I look at the pews, and my church happens to be full, but across this country, they're getting emptier and emptier. One priest, we got one priest in the New York Archdiocese that graduated. The seminaries are empty. And we're going after nuns average age, and you're a spring young chicken, but a lot of them that are in the 70s and doing work here that no one else would volunteer to do on the heels of the abuse scandal. I mean, to me, I get most mad at the laity who keeps quiet about this, because that's not in the best interest of the church. And it's a great church, but I sometimes think the voices that are loudest aren't the ones who speak for the plurality, if you will. I appreciate you letting me vent here a little bit, but I know a lot of people feel the same way I do.
I agree, and I love my church, but I think they made a poor choice of a group to go against. And I would think now,
Plus, nuns are tough.
in retrospect, they're saying, "Ooh, not a good idea. Who called this one?" Because it doesn't make any sense. But the wellspring of support from the laity, Catholic, non-Catholic, all over, has been astounding for all of our religious communities. I know from the article that came from the New York Times, I got many, many notices and letters of support. And one man in California sent me $2.75. Another sent me $10,000. And instead of sending it to his local church, he gave it to me for the whole year. This is his donation. So there's been small tokens, but very heartfelt and real messages of support for us, and that's been very gratifying to all of us. Not that we were looking for that. We don't need that.
Yeah.
You're there to do the gospel. You're there. Jesus is the heart of who we are in our lives, and you want to make those lives. You don't want this to get in the way. And so we've really dealt with it, but it's been a way of bringing us all together also, to really look at who we are and what we do. And we know in our heart of hearts that this is of God. We're of God. And we're happy doing what we do, but it's brought many people into our lives that wouldn't be there. So maybe that's the message God's looking right now. They made a big mistake, but boy, these guys better watch out.
I will say, sister, anybody who knows anything about parochial school, last people you ever mess with are nuns, all right? So, and they also don't, I would imagine, really like being told what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, especially since they're not looking for hosannas or pats on the back for doing their daily work. What happens if the Vatican, pardon the pun, doesn't get religion here and doesn't learn quickly that they picked the wrong group to mess with? What do religious orders do? Do they follow the dictum here that they have to be more politicized and be more strident against different populations that they really haven't? I mean, what do you guys do?
Well, again, we're putting our support behind the leadership of the LCWR, our support and our prayers and our deliberations
and again, that's about 50 some odd thousand sisters and members of religious orders in the country.
80% of the religious women in the United States. And we're waiting for them to deliberate, to get the input from all the people, the groups of religious they represent, and then come out with an adequate statement. So the jury's out right now on it, but again, we know where we stand, and I said it's stunned as well as saddened, because this is my church. This is the church I devoted my life to. I love it. but you want it to be the best. We want to be doing what we're supposed to be doing, all universally, with the lay people, with even people who are not all working with us, who are not necessarily Catholic, but have a perspective that there are so many people in the world who need our help. Let's put our energies and our focus there, and our time that we're here on this earth to do. That's what we're called to do.
Give me a reason to be optimistic that people are going to figure this thing out, not just with this, but that some common sense is going to prevail instead of trying to demonize, it seems, more folks instead of talking about the good things about the church. Looking
at the history of the church, God's Spirit prevails. And I believe, and I hope, and I pray that that's going to happen. And we have to leave it in God's hand with a trusting. If we have to put our money where our mouth is here, I mean, you know, you can't just say, well, this has got to be this way. But I'm praying that really optimism is the Spirit of God will move. Maybe not the answer we want, but then hard decisions have to be made.